Hey everyone, and welcome to the Ultimate Guide to Drawing Faces. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to draw the skull.
Hi, welcome to Pencil Kings. My name is Lori B. The following drawing lesson is on how to draw faces. In the first few segments that you'll watch, I'm going to illustrate the bones of the head and face, which are your cranium, your mandible or jaw, and your spine. Like the framework of a house, understanding the structure of the skeleton underneath the surfaces that we're learning to draw is the basis of comprehending true human form and solid character design. Now, of course, I'm a firm believer in learn rules first, then break them. So in the latter half of this tutorial, I will draw side-by-side realistic and cartoony faces of female, male, and baby facial proportions. As well, I will begin to explore how modifying these standard shapes and proportions can lead us to virtually unlimited combinations of character designs. Alright everybody, let's get started. And we're going to jump into skeletons. That is first and foremost what our face structure is based off of for this face lessons for today. So I'm going to begin, I'm going to use some, again, I'm just going to cover with you, I've got some various colored pencils and I've got a graphite mechanical. You'll see me come in maybe with this. This is a eraser stick, hard eraser, kneadable eraser. Awesome stuff. All serve very cool different purposes. So I'm just going to start with one color here and just kind of show you the construction of a skeleton of the head. Now we've got three basic components of bone structure to consider. We've got the cranium, which is your skull, which is your brain is housed inside. I'm just drawing a skull from the side here, by the way. I'm just going to kind of roughly cut that in half. Just going to give it an eye line, kind of a low eye line here. This is basically a skull, and we've all seen it before too. This is a basic shape of a head drawn from the side. So you have cranium, cheekbone here. This lower part here is the mandible or your jaw, teeth. And I'm going to incorporate the spine for the sake of this lesson because it does mount to kind of the lower back side here of the head. So there's your three basic parts: cranium, mandible, spine. When you're looking at the skull from the side, it tends to be kind of quite elongated as opposed to when you're looking at it from the front. I'm just going to move this over a tad. Let me just draw some parallel lines here so I keep everything in the same, in the same proportion roughly, but I'm going to draw side by side. If I were to turn that head facing camera dead on, here's a middle line here, roughly this. Okay, jaw lines up here, chin comes out. And that would be like looking at the skull from the front. You'll see as I piece together both of these here, I'll do them both together in progression so that you can see how things are staying in proportion here by using these parallel lines. And I'm going to talk about these a little bit later when I'm talking about doing a head rotation of your character. Eye socket. We've all seen skulls before, and we know that that's just a big hole. This edge of your eye socket is actually your cheekbone. This ridge defines your brow bone, sometimes called orbital ridge. Okay. And we'll see here. So I want to make sure that I keep everything in alignment here. Drawing a skull from the front, then we see these kind of triangular shaped holes is your eye socket. brow bone, just like over here, brow bone. It's actually a whole ridge that comes across. But for the most part, brows are there. For the most part, cheekbones are here. Now here's where we get that nice skull shape, traditional skull shape. Here's your temples. And there's not a whole lot of bone there. It's very thin. If you ever see a real skeleton, you'll see that it gets really thin here. Tends to get really thin around here too. Right. But there we get those nice strong skull cheekbones here. This is all kind of one piece here. This. You would see a kind of a dent here on a skull. That's indicating that temple area right there. Cheekbone. This is all one part. This is nasal bone. The rest is cartilage. I think most of you obviously know that. There's nasal bone and the top teeth. Then the bottom teeth, which usually the top teeth, most people have like kind of an overbite. You can change this. We'll talk about that later in character designs, where you can change proportions and really push and exaggerate some of your design components. But for the most part, people have overbites. I've seen people with underbites, and that can create some interesting character designs for sure. This part here is your mandible. This is like a hinge joint here. This can move. Cranium tends to stay rigid. There's not a lot of flex in your bones, period. But especially when you come to, if any of you out there are considering animation, especially a 2D animation, you don't get a great deal of give on the skull, but you can get a lot of swaying jaws and slack jaw and lots of movement through the mandible. But it's good to have a solid cranium mass. Alright, looking at it from the front, it's a lot narrower, but it's going to have characteristics from the front side. And again, I mentioned the temples being one of them, the cheekbones being another. Now this shape, when it comes down into your upper teeth, we know that our teeth, let me just draw that along, there we go. We know that our teeth do not actually go right to the edges here, so we have to study. And I mean, if you have access to a full-size or even smaller scale human skeleton replica or real or whatever, look at it. Look at it from all angles. Draw it from all angles. That's where I learned. That's where I learned, is in animation school. I had access to that skeleton and I drew it all the time. Assignment or not, I kept drawing that thing to understand human anatomy. If you don't have a skeleton, learn from books. Get a medical book or get a anatomy for artists specifically. So here I'm drawing in this hinge part. There's a hollow in your cheeks, which is why when you puff your cheeks out, air comes out these sides and you can puff the skin out. But there's basically from the side and from the front, nasal bone. Here we go. Teeth, roughly. Okay, and I'm just going to, next, in the next segment, I'm going to draw over top of this and show you how, as you change the skeleton, you change the face and the expression. These first three segments are all about the human skeleton, beginning with the basics, the cranium, the mandible, and the spine. Second, I will literally flesh out the drawing by showing you where to add skin, muscles, and other basic tissue to add thickness to your skeleton. And then finally, I will demonstrate the hinge of the jaw and explain how when we alter the skeleton, we invariably change the surface as well. Okay, I'm going to get into the second part of constructing this face and this head based off of this skull. And I just want to add all the skin components on top of this. I do want to point out that our eye sockets are quite large and our eyeballs are even larger. There's a reason why our eyeballs don't bulge out of the sockets, is because they're held in there quite nicely by this orbital ridge and by this cheekbone ridge. But the eyeball is pretty large inside of our heads. And just as a technicality, they say when you're drawing eyes from the side, there is a slight slope downward as opposed to an eye that just bulges out like this. There's your iris, lower lid, upper lid. It's not so much upright as it is sloped this way. And the reason for that is if this is your brow bone, and we know that, say, an eyebrow is on the skin here, well, your eyelids are lower down, so right around there. And your eyeball, you're already looking at kind of the lower half of this eyeball anyway, so that's the reason for the slope toward the lower lid. And then our eyes look forward, so that iris usually right around there. I'm going to draw this in with a darker color here, with just a graphite, straight up graphite mechanical pencil here. Just like that. Eyebrows. There's not a great deal of muscle between skull and skin on your forehead. Very, very thin sheets of muscle there. And here it comes down to the nasal bone. We've got generally some cartilage there, some thickness around the lips, depending on how cushy the lips are. I'm going to build a lip up around the lower teeth or the jaw. And then again, not a great deal of bulk or thickness between the skin of the chin and the mandible bone itself. So I hope that you can see how this face, as we've constructed it here, is really starting to take shape. Our mouth openings are not huge gashes all the way back to our ears. And I think in cartoons maybe, but in reality not so much. Everybody's different, and some people are going to have that characteristic somewhat more than others, but our mouth openings are not that huge. There's a bit of flexibility now in the skin when you're talking about opening the mouth and stretching out the mouth. There'll be some give there. But that's basically it. Not a huge thickness over the whole cranium. Hair and scalp it's really the hair that's adding the volume in there. Ear, I'm going to come back to maybe my colored pencil here. Ear tends to mount around in line with the eye, the top of the ear. And then the lobe comes around down near this hinge of the lower jaw. And that's why sometimes when people talk, their ears wiggle, because their lobe is connected to the skin of their jaw. And so when the jaw moves, the ear tugs subtly. Okay. We all know that that temple region comes between the ear and the eye. And this, the skin that covers, the membrane that covers that temple also tends to pop and move when a person's talking, because their mouth is their jaw is moving and their ear is wiggling and that skin gets tugged. Coming to the spine here, as it mounts to the skull. Down the back, sometimes you can see the ridges of the vertebrae down people's backs, of their necks, and all the way down their back. But at the front here, this is not the entire thickness of the neck, and I want to clarify. In between the spine, which is down the back side, but on the front side, between the spine and your throat, you have to remember that there is a windpipe in there, your throat. On guys, the Adam's apple is very evident out front. And so you have to allow for quite a lot of thickness. Our spines are thick, but you have to remember then that there's also sheets of muscle built in around here, voice box and whatever else you want to call it, but you need to leave room there for the thickness of the neck. And that's some basic head construction there. Beginning with the basics, the cranium, the mandible, and the spine. Second, I will literally flesh out the drawing by showing you where to add skin, muscles, and other basic tissue to add thickness to your skeleton. And then finally, I'll demonstrate the hinge of the jaw and explain how when we alter the skeleton, we invariably change the surface as well. Okay, now I'm going to show you what happens when we move the mandible. This is going to remain, cranium is going to remain unchanged, but we're going to swivel this hinge joint. And I'm going to use my awesome kneadable eraser. By thinning it out like this, what a kneadable eraser is really good for is just lifting away partial pigment. If I were to use a hard eraser, I'd probably be able to erase away quite a substantial difference, but in fact I might do that. But I just want to lift away some of this because I don't want this drawing to get too muddy looking, but I do want to show you what happens when we move that hinge joint. So I'm going to bring in a different color pencil here. Let me redraw this upper teeth. Right here is where it hinges. There is a little bit of, people can pop their jaws, and this can kind of pop out of its hinge somewhat. But when we swing this, I'm just going to draw a line here from the jaw joint to the chin. And let's say we're going to swing it down to about here. Well, everything that I've drawn here, this whole piece, is just going to pivot. So looking a little like that. Takes a little bit of eyeballing it to get it looking right, or you could just maybe trace it on a separate piece of paper and trace it back just until you're more familiar with it. But by swinging this hinge, now we've got an open mouth. Check it out. Right there. Now I'm going to come back in with my graphite pencil here. And we saw how the corner of the mouth does not go back all the way to your ear. Maybe in some wacky character design, maybe a Tim Burton world, sure. But in a realistic sense, no it doesn't. So the corner of the mouth only has so much give and flexibility before it gets stretched to its max. So if the jaw came open like that, I'm hoping you guys can see how the mouth comes open like that. You might see a little bit of the upper teeth jut out here, but let's remember that skin is a mass outside or beyond the skull, and so lips and flesh is always going to protrude out farther than the bone itself. It offers some structure, it gives us some guidelines. But let's not make skin too thin. Now, we saw before that the thickness of the neck was right around here. And when a jaw comes back like this, the skin that connected the jaw there before is now all going to get wrinkled up like this. This is kind of a funny pose. Without moving the neck out of the way, it kind of looks funny how the skin is wrinkling, because a jaw can't really come that snug up to a throat like that. But there would be some gathering of the skin back here. In this particular case, I would probably change the position of that vertebrae and the thickness of the neck so that it was doing something a little more like that. Because if a person is going to hinge their jaw open and yell with a big open mouth like this, they're probably leaning forward as they do so, and that protrudes their neck forward that way. Oh, we could also change some eye expression here. I'll lift away some with my kneadable eraser and preserve enough of that drawing underneath. There's the eyeball unchanged. Socket. But let's really lift that lid up. The eye is going to swing open like that. Upper lid's going to come up like that. The brow bone is here, but we do have thin muscles in our foreheads and all across the surface of our skin that we can pull our eyebrows up, and we can actually get a pretty fun expression in there. Now, can you see the surprised expression on our little character? Oh, awesome. All right, and we'll end that segment there.
If you like this video, please help us by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Tell us which videos are your favorites, or give us suggestions about what you'd like to see in the next video. And if you'd love to join a private community of dedicated artists, come check us out at pencilkings.com, where we help artists from all over the world improve their artwork every single day.